It's the show of the week.
Hello, welcome to Show of the Week. You know, Chicago the Musical has one of my favorite titles of a piece of musical theater, but I'm not talking about Chicago the Musical. The version of Chicago the Musical you know is actually not really the original version of Chicago the Musical. It's the very well-loved and very long-running revival that's breaking like 19,000 performances right now. It's the longest-running American musical in Broadway history. The title of the show I love actually comes from the original production of the show. It was called Chicago, a Musical Vaudeville. Just let that sink in for a second. So, Chicago, this production you're seeing, a musical vaudeville, a performance with people on stage doing vaudevillian acts. Or, Chicago the city is such a joke, such a farce, that it might as well be called a musical vaudeville. We don't convict people who should be convicted, everyone's just doing whatever they want, and we're laughing about it. That title sets you up perfectly for the subtle, insidious sarcasm that runs throughout the entire show. I'll show you what I mean. In Nowadays, near the end of the show, Roxy's coming to terms with all of the happenings of the show, and she sings, "In 50 years or so, it's gonna change, you know, but it's heaven nowadays." Chicago is set in the 1920s and premiered in the 1970s. For those of you struggling with the math at home, that's about 50 years. So what she's saying is, things are great now in 1920s Prohibition era, but in 50 years, it is absolutely gonna change. But the intent, at least as far as I've extrapolated it, is the exact opposite. They're saying, when this show premiered, nothing has changed. There's just as much corruption, there's just as much sex and drugs and violence, and many people speculate that that is why the original production didn't do as well, was because we weren't accustomed to those sort of things. Now, didn't do as well, it played for like 900 shows, but it's hard to beat the, you know, blockbuster that is Chicago the Musical nowadays, but it's beside the point. The last thing I want to talk about, and I hope I'm remembering this right, in the original libretto for Chicago, a Musical Vaudeville, there's a listing of many of the songs in the show and the vaudevillian acts that they are based upon. Now, if you're interested in that, you should Google it, but what I found surprising out of the whole thing is one of the only songs that isn't based on a traditional vaudevillian act is Act 2's Class. You know, where Velma and Mama are singing about, oh, the world's gone lowbrow, everything is up and down nowadays. And, well, this one stumps me. It is one of the slowest numbers in the show. I wonder why it's the only one not based upon a pre-existing vaudevillian number. Maybe you do. If you do, you should let me know. That's all I've got for you this week, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye! In case you haven't heard, I have recently started a Patreon. Patreon is a platform through which people who watch art that artists create can support the artists that they love. If you are in a place of financial stability where you're able to throw $1 my way to fund my obsession with musical theater, or at least my coffee addiction, that would be the most beautiful thing in the world. There's more info over at the page. You should go click on it. Hooray!